welcome back. We're having a lecture as usual this morning, and the next subject will be user rights. So let's get into it right away. Everything is okay, right? You have screen sharing, microphone. So last time we had the lecture, we stopped at this point here. I gave the question for Lab Report 2, question number 1, which is about application installation. I hope you've done this already and you have saved your screenshots, sorry. And also we talked about demonstrated multitasking in text mode, the Control Alt with the function keys. So that's where we stopped in the last lecture. So the next subject this morning is to talk about user rights. Maybe the first thing is to explain, to make sure there's no confusion there, the difference between what we call rights and permissions in computer jargon. Because in everyday life you might use these terms as if they meant the same thing, the right or the permission, but it's two different things when it comes to computers or networks. Permissions are something we've already studied, like chmod. Permissions are about accessing specific resources. User might have read-only access to a folder, or the permission to print to a printer. I'll show all the printers also very soon. So read-only, write access to a folder or to a file, these are permissions. So it is on a per item basis. For this folder, the user might have read-only. For the other folder, the same user might have read and write. Those are permissions. User rights, on the other end, are about administrative tasks. The right of user to perform a task that normally only root can do, only the administrator can do. So this is what we call user rights. It's something we haven't done yet, and it's the next subject this morning. So we're okay with that? The difference between rights and permissions. Permissions are about accessing specific resources, the level of access to a resource, such as read-only or read and write. While rights are about administrative tasks that the user might be allowed to do or not. All right, so let's get into it then. So user rights are done in Linux and CentOS in particular, using this file named sudoers. Actually, I have also the explanation of rights versus permissions, so you can also read the short explanations here. So examples of rights could be mount, unmount, shutdown. So these are simple examples that by default only root can do these things. Only root can mount or unmount or use a shutdown command. But then root can give this right to other users. And this is what we're looking at immediately. Right? So it's the etc sudoers file. So I'll go into one of the Linux computers there. See, so if I check again my user database, so let's say I will use user 3 in this example. Now, just to show that user 3 cannot do administrative tasks as it is, if I switch to user 3, I'll do su user 3. And try, for example, to mount or unmount a device. Now, right now, the DVD is not mounted, okay? So I'll try to mount a DVD. So if I type mount, what was the command to mount? Device CD-ROM, media DVD. See, it says only root can do that. So this is exactly what we call, it's an example of a write. It's a task that only root can do by default. So when I'm user 3, I'm not allowed to do this operation. I don't have the right for it. But now I'll come back as root, and I'll give this user this specific right to use the mount command. So it's in the sudoers file. I'll do nano etc sudoers. So sudo is the future sudo, sudoers is the file. So it's a large file with many examples and explanations. So you go to the end of the file, and this is where you enter instructions about users or groups of users. You see there are examples. When you put a %sign before the name there, it refers to a group name. You don't put a %sign, it is simply username. So this will be very specific now for user 3 only. So I'll type user 3. And then you see in the examples they show localhost. I prefer personally to type the IP of the computer rather than localhost. Right? So what's the IP of this machine again? Let's check. So the first IP on ETH0 is 100.60. So I'll type the IP. And then space. You see there are already examples here, like so not space actually, it's equal sign. So now I need to put the mount command here. Now what you need to know here to find out is in which directory is the mount command, because we need to put a path. You see in the examples here, they are showing spin, but this doesn't necessarily apply to this version of CentOS 7. These are just general examples. So let's find out where the mount command is. So that's where the find command will be very useful. We have seen the find command previously. Following, by the way. You don't see the screen?
Yes, sir.
Let's check again.
Yes, sir. Maybe it's not shared.
All right, I'll share it again. It was shared earlier. It's unpleasant when it appears like this. I checked earlier, it was shared. You see it now? All right. So let's show me, I'll show it again then. So what we're doing is user writes here. So etc sudoers is the file in which a user can be assigned rights. And here you have the explanation of the difference between rights and permissions. And I'm applying it now to the mount, the example of the mount command. So I want to give a user the right to mount. So I showed earlier, I'll show it again there before I continue with this, but I'll do this from scratch, right? So let me exit this now. I'm not sure how much you're able to see earlier. So here we go, you see. I were initially logged in as user 3 here, and I tried to mount the DVD. And it gave me the message only root can do it because the user does not have the right to mount. Okay? So now I'm back as the root user, and I want to give this user, user 3, the right to mount the DVD. So for that, I will edit the etc sudoers file. So it's a large file. You go all the way to the end. And here's where you type a directive. Now there are examples here. And when you want a single user to be assigned the right, you just put the name of the user. See this example, when you see %, it means it's a group name. The % refers to the fact that the following name is a group name. So if I want just a username, I'll put user3. And then instead of putting localhost, I prefer, based on previous experience, to put the IP of the machine. I find it more reliable. So the IP of this machine is 100.60. And now we need to find out in which directory is the mount command. So I'll run the find command here. Find. I'm looking for, under the slash everywhere, the name mount. You need to make sure you know exactly where the command is, because it will find it in the path that you specify. So you see it's in USR bin in CentOS 7. This is the mount executable command in USR bin. You know that USR bin in particular is a location where you have Linux executable files. So that's what I will type then. /usr/bin and the mount command. And I'll make it very specific. So I'll give the user the right to mount the DVD, the CD-ROM, into media DVD. So that's the idea. Then you put the username, or if you want a group name, you put a % followed by the group name. You put the IP of this machine, on which you're giving the right to the user. You specify the path and name of the command for which you want to give the user a right, and the details of the command there. It can be very specific, as you can see here. All right. So take notes. I'm not in a rush here. Any questions? I'll check. So I'll save this. Now there's nothing to restart when you edit this file. It checks it whenever necessary. So it's ready to function. So it means I'll log in as user3 again. I made the SU here, although I prefer to log out and log in. So SU user3. Now, when you give a user right there to check it, you log in as the user and you do sudo -L. -L will give you the list of rights that this user has. Now, the first time you do sudo -L for a given user, it gives you the speech here. So you'll see it's only the first time for a user. All right, so make sure you read these things. You know, it's like ethical. And then you type the password of the user. Of course, this is not the root password. It's asking about the password of the user. Looks like I'll type the wrong password. All right, I think I know it. Here we go. So that's now here I see this. It says user3 may run the following commands on this host. Host means this computer, and it's exactly what I gave as user right, the right to mount a DVD. So it means now this user should be able to mount a DVD, and we'll verify this immediately. So earlier the command failed, right? When I tried, see it's still in the history there. Earlier I did this command and it told me only root can do it. What if I try it now? Still tells me only root can do it. However, the way to do it now that I've given the user sudo right, you type sudo before the command. So that's the way it works. You type sudo space the command for which the user has the right. And now I mounted the DVD. So if I do df now, the DVD has been mounted. So this is an important feature. I mean, by itself you can realize that giving a right to user is an important thing, but also in some distributions of Linux such as Ubuntu, by default, the system doesn't even let you log in as root. You can log in only as a different user that you create during installation, and then whenever you need to run administrative tasks, use this sudo feature. So it's something really important to know in Linux. Any questions on this example? You still cannot see the screen. There's probably a personal issue with your computer. Check it out, because unless I get error messages too, I do have the screen shared at this point. All right, so now this was a specific right just to mount the DVD. What if I try to unmount it now? What was the command to unmount? It is umount, right? Umount, and the command is media DVD. So it tells me operation not permitted. What if I put sudo before, just like I did for mount? Still tells me I cannot do it. I'm not allowed. And no surprise there, because in the sudoers file, I gave the user only the right to mount, not to unmount. So it's very specific. So the second example now, I'll give this user the right to unmount as well. So I'll come back as the root user. Back to the sudoers file. And also let's find out again, where is the unmount command? It will be fair to guess in the same location as mount usr-bin, but let's not take it for granted. So I'll look for the unmount command, umount. Another example of the find command here. And no surprise, in usr-bin as well. So back to the sudoers file. Now I'll just add another line similar to the previous one to give this user the right to unmount. And I'll edit the line. So here we go. And now I'll come back as user 3. See if I do sudo -L again to see my rights. This time it doesn't give me the speech again. And since I already typed my password earlier, it doesn't ask it again. But in general, it does ask the password. So now you see that I do have the right to unmount at this point, to unmount the DVD specifically. So the DVD is still mounted now. I will unmount it, because it's mounted here, media DVD. So to unmount, I'll type sudo umount media DVD. So no error messages. And when I do df, I see that now it is no longer mounted. So it's simple. I'll just recap now general procedure, but do you have any questions on this sudo feature? So to recap, what's the procedure? I'll come back as root. So you want to give a user a specific right. Then you go to, you edit the file etc sudoers. And you add a line at the end of the file, similar to these two lines I just did. So you put the name of the user, the IP of the computer, and the path and name of the command for which you want to give the right to a user. So to find out the path, use the find command. That's how I found that mount or unmount or in USR bin. So you put the path and name of the command and any details that you want to include in this command, such as in this case, limiting the mount operation to the DVD only. If you want to assign a right like this to a group, then you put % the group name. Then all the members of that group will get the right. For example, in my system, if I check the group file, you see I have groups like sales, tech. So if tech has many members there, user 2, user 3, user 9, Dragon. So if I want to give a right to the group tech, then I'll put % tech here instead of just user 3, and then all the members which are shown here will get that right. So once you understand how it works there, you may do the same thing for other administrative commands. In fact, as you'll see in a moment there, that's the second lab report question. So any questions again on sudo? All right. So going back to my lecture notes, see, in our example could be shutdown, any administrative tasks. So here it is, I have lab report 2 question 2. So give a user other than root, such as user 3, the right to create and delete groups. So basically it's about the group add and group del commands. See, as it is now, just to show you exactly what I'm asking there. If I log in again as user 3, sorry, it's SU. So if I attempt to do group add, let's say I try to create a new group there, group add project 1 as a group name, it tells me permission denied. Here if I put sudo at the beginning, it doesn't let me, all right? So that's exactly what the question is for second question of lab report, to give a user the sudo right for group add and group del, so that the user will be able to manage groups, create and delete groups. So log in as the user and verify. Your screenshots must include the sudo -l command to show that no other rights have been assigned to the user. So I don't want these users to have a large number of rights, only the right to use group add and group del. So we need to see the exact configuration that you have done in that you'll do in the sudoers file. also include sudo group and sudo group del commands to demonstrate the user creating and deleting a group. And the due date for lab report is Monday, May 10th. So you're supposed to have already done the first question, which was given earlier, which is here. So these are two questions. Question 1 was about application installation, and now you have question 2. So you put them together in lab report number 2, which you submit latest on Monday. So let me know if you have any questions, and then we'll move on to the next subject. All right, so no questions for now. So I hope you don't get wrong message that, yes, lab report requirements have been already given here. However, we still have a number of interesting and important things to do in this module. And next Sunday, we have the exam of this module, right, the lab test. So what's coming next now, the subjects that we'll do the rest of the day today and tomorrow are also very important, although there is no lab report on them, but they will be, or they could be, in the lab test next Sunday. So continue paying attention, take notes and practice on what I'm about to explain next today and tomorrow. So next thing is our service management. It's a relatively short subject, very important, of course. We have been doing this to a certain extent anyway, but now it's time to look at it in more detail. How to manage services in Linux. And it's also related to the following subject, which is printers. So I've already been using the system control command, for example, to restart the network service, right? Let's review that. We know that to restart network service overall, use the command system control restart network. So it's an example of managing a service. In this case, it's the network service, and here is the structure of the command. System control is a command, and then you put an option, an operation such as restart in this case, and then the name of the service. And now, this is something we'll be doing more and more often. We're about to actually talk about printer management now, and we'll use this command. And in the next module, and all the following modules there, we'll do lots of networking services, and we'll be using the system control commands on a regular basis. So the idea is to see now, in general, what other options do we have with the system control command. And in the lecture notes, you have it here. So the four most typical options are status, which shows you the current status of the service, then restart, like the one I just demonstrated. But restart, in fact, includes two operations. It will stop the service and then start it again. Or you can do stop, just to stop the service, or if it's already stopped, you would do start to start it again. These are four common options to use for any given services. So I'll demonstrate this for the printer service. In fact, as soon as I finish discussion in a few minutes, I'll start showing how to use printers in Linux there. So let's right away introduce the service for it. For printers, the service name is CUPS. I have it also in the lecture notes. CUPS is mentioned here. So CUPS stands for Common Unix Printer Service. Common Unix Printer Service. So that's the default printer service in CentOS. So I'll apply now these 4 options to the CUPS service. So if I want to check the status as it is, let's clear the screen. I'll do So I'll do system control, status, CUPS. So this is to check to see if currently is a service for printers running or not. It's telling me it's running, active, because CUPS is actually activated at boot time. And we'll see how to also manage that. But the way it is by default is that every time you boot up your CentOS server, it turns on automatically this CUPS service for printers. So it is running right now. So it shows you in green here, active running. So what if I stop it? So I'll do system control, stop CUPS. All right, so now the service has been stopped. So if I check the status again, now it tells me there's no green active message, right? It gives me information about service, but it is not running right now. It was running earlier, it was active, but then I stopped it here, and now it is no longer active. So if I want to activate it again, this time I'll use the start option. And now it's running again. We can check the status. All right. And there is the restart option, which is also very important. Restart, again, is 2 operations in one. Restart means stop it and then start it. And it's particularly useful when you make configuration changes. As the root user, when you configure or reconfigure a service, you make changes to the configuration, you will need in general to restart the corresponding service so that the changes will become effective. Because if you don't, because usually configuring a service for us will mean editing the configuration file. So if you don't restart a service after that, it will not take your changes into consideration. All right? So it is restart. So of course it's still running now, but when I did restart, 2 things happened there. It stopped it, and then immediately afterwards, it started the service again. All right, so any questions on these 4 options there, status, stop, start, and restart? We're okay? And now there are 2 more options I've mentioned in the lecture notes there, enable and disable. What's the meaning of this? Now, it's important to understand this, right? It's a bit tricky, or if you don't pay attention. So the 4 options I just finished discussing are about the current status of the service. Is it running right now? Or if you do stop, it will stop it now. If you do start, it will start it now. Same thing for restart. So these are things that happen right now in the current session. But enable and disable are about what will happen next time you reboot the machine, or in general when you reboot the machine. So enable means if you put enable for a service, it means when you reboot the machine, it will automatically start this service. When you put disable, it's the opposite. It means whenever you reboot the machine, it will not automatically start the service. So enable and disable are about what happens at boot time. They will not affect the current status of the service. Okay, so to help you understand better, I'll do a couple of examples here. So as it is now, the CAP service is running, right? I'll do it again. I'll type the status. So it is running now. So what if I put system control, disable CAPS? So what this means again is that I don't want this service to start at boot time. But if I check the status now, nothing has changed, still running. Disable doesn't stop your service now. It simply means that when you reboot the machine, it will not start this service. Now, I'm not going to spend time in the lecture rebooting, but I encourage you to try it in the lab time. So if I were to reboot at this point and check the status, it would be, it won't be running. But also, it doesn't mean that you would not be able to start it afterwards. If you disable the service like I did here, it simply means again that at boot time, it will not run it. But if I reboot, then I can type system control start CAPS. It will start it. Disable doesn't mean that you cannot start it. It simply means it will not start it automatically at boot time. So it all depends whether you want the service to run or not at boot time automatically. So the decision is based on the following. If it's a service that you intend to use often on a regular basis, then it's a good idea to keep it enabled so that every time you reboot, you don't have to worry about it, it runs. But if it's something you use only occasionally, it might be a better idea to keep it disabled and start it manually only when you want to use it. Because running services just like that is an extra burden to the system. If you don't need them on a regular basis, keep them disabled. Start them manually by typing system control start CAPS only when you need that service. I hope I'm clear with this. So if I type enable again now I'll show you actually the opposite. Look, what I'll do now, I'll stop the service. So it means now it's no longer running. Okay, it's not running now. So now I'll do system control enable CAPS. So what will this do? Will it start a service now? No, it would not. This will not start a service. It's simply saying when you reboot, start the service automatically. But nothing will change now. All right? So if I check the status now, still not running. But if I reboot the machine, it will start it. This is what it means. If I want to start now, then I have to type again system control start CAPS. If I will start it now without rebooting, I will start it manually. So now it's running again. All right, so let me know if you have any questions on any of the options of system control, which are summarized here. No questions? All right, so I'll move on to the next subject. Last thing, as you may find it annoying, but you know, I've been teaching this semester the program for a long time, and you know, it is well known. I think maybe you've heard about it from other classmates or friends and so on. This block 3, seems to be maybe the hardest for many students, but the reason for it is not because this material is inherently hard by itself. It's because it is different from what people are used to. And the only way to get it right, to do well in this semester, is to follow everything which is taught here and practice it on a daily basis. And I'm not trying to scare you, but let me tell you that this first module is the easiest of the whole semester. As we start next semester in a few weeks there, we'll move to higher gear. The labs will get more sophisticated. So if you don't practice well what we're doing now, you will not be prepared to handle what's coming next in the next module, even if you somehow pass this one. This is the easiest module in the whole semester. So please, everything I'm teaching here, follow it well and practice it. Otherwise, what's going to happen is that there will be a good chance that you would fail the modules there. You need to repeat either individual modules or the whole semester. And not only it will be a burden for you, but it may delay your graduation. You may need to extend your study permit, things like that. And I don't wish anything like that to happen to anyone. But I cannot do it for you. I can only teach, and you can do it for yourself. And plus, this is very valuable. Not only you're learning Linux, but this is a very good opportunity to build your computer and network skills, to learn something different. It is used in industry, but even if it weren't, even if you end up doing a job in which it is not used at the beginning, it is still very valuable in terms of learning computer skills and networking skills. So next I'll move on to printers. Any questions on service management? All right, so you can move on to the next subject. So now it's about printers, installing and using printers on a CentOS computer. Of course, we don't have the physical printer, but that's not important. Just like we do in Windows there, it's about installing the software device driver. So the system will behave as if there were hardware printer there. So you can still check the operation, how to configure it. If the hardware device was there, then you'll also get the paper printout. But otherwise, we can configure the system to handle printers. So here we go. To remind you of jargon there, printer versus print device. So the print device, if it were available, would be the actual hardware device. printer is the software component, the software device driver that you add to your operating system so that it will be able to see and use that specific hardware device. Even if the hardware device is not there physically, you can still install a printer and learn how to configure it and send print jobs to it. So an important concept in any modern operating system is printer spooling. And you have probably seen this in Windows, but I'll remind you of what it means. So printer spooling is the feature that when a user sends a print job, a document to be printed to the printer there, it does not immediately go to the print device. What happens is that the operating system takes the job there, the document, and will put it in a queue. It will save it temporarily in a directory called the queue or the print spooler on the hard drive. So the documents to be printed will be like in a waiting list there. They will be temporarily saved in the spooler directory on the hard drive, and then the printer service will one by one send them to the print device in due time. So the user just sends the print job to the spooler, and then the user doesn't have to worry about it, can do other tasks, and then the print job will go into a queue, and then the operating system, through its printing service, will take care of sending those jobs one by one in the right sequence to the print device. That's referred to as printer spooling. So it's temporary storage of print jobs in a queue before they get actually printed. Okay? Any questions on the concept of spooling if it's not clear for you? Printer spooling. So it's a bit like, if I make an analogy, if you, let's say you go and see a physician to a hospital or clinic, wherever. Now, what happens there when you don't right away walk into that place and go immediately to the doctor's office, do you? Normally, unless you're very lucky, it does happen like that. First, they make you sit into a waiting room, and then when your turn comes, you go into the doctor's room. It's like same idea as printer spooling. It's like a waiting list, a temporary place where the jobs are sitting or waiting before they go to the final destination, which is the print device. All right, so before we install a printer, let's see where is the spooler folder in CentOS. So I have actually the information here. Is in var spool. We have seen earlier in this course that the var directory has a number of functions. One of those functions is temporary memory, temporary storage. And this is an example of it. So when I go to var spool, so spool actually refers to spooling, but it's not only for printers. In var spool, we have a number of subdirectories for a variety of services. So, but there's CAPS there. So CAPS is, as I explained earlier, the printer service. So var spool CAPS is a default directory where print jobs will be spooled. So if I go there now, so I'm in var spool CAPS. See, it's empty right now. There's only a TMP subdirectory, but there are no print jobs yet. And no surprise, I haven't even installed a printer yet on this machine. But this is the place where the print jobs will be put in a queue before they'll be sent to an actual print device, if you do have a print device. We're okay? So what I'll do next is to install a printer on this machine, and the command to install a printer is right here. It is system config printer. So that's one way of installing a new printer in CentOS. So this runs a wizard actually, so it's graphical. So it's very straightforward. I'll click on add to add a new printer, or you can click on a plus sign there. Now for the firewall adjustment, just you may say do it later or adjust, doesn't matter. So I'll click on adjust firewall. We're not dealing with the firewall at this point. So we're not doing network printing yet. It will be done in next module. So for now, it's only local printer on this machine. So of course, in modern technology there, printers are USB based. So normally when you plug it to a computer, it will detect it automatically on the USB port. But here I don't even have the print device. So what this wizard gives me is older ports on which printers used to be plugged in the past, such as serial port. In Windows, when you run the wizard, again in control panel, will give you LPT1 by default, parallel port. So it's for older standards for printer installation. But it doesn't matter for us which kind of port we connect it to. We don't even have a print device in the first place. We're just learning how to install and use a printer. So serial port 1 would do nicely. And the defaults are okay here. Don't worry about the settings of the serial port. Forward. So I will cancel searching for drivers because, again, if it was an actual print device plugged here on the USB port, actually I no need to cancel it, it gives up by itself. But since we don't have an actual device plugged to the machine, it doesn't detect anything by itself. So I'll manually specify a model here, such as, let's say, Canon. So I'll pick the first model there, or maybe something. For many of them are two options there, it doesn't matter. So here we go, 455i. I'm using Canon 455i. So short name for his printer. So it could call it anything, but I'll keep it as itself. But just to make it easier to type, I'll remove the hyphen. And also I remove the I in the end. So it's just a user-friendly name, Canon 455. The rest are optional information here. I'm now printing a test page, cancel. So here we go. Canon 455 has been installed. Any questions on how to install a printer? Okay, I don't see any questions today, so it's went very quiet. So now that the printer has been installed, I like to use it, try to send a print job to it and verify that it will work properly, even though we don't have the actual hardware device. So I can close this wizard. Let's remember the name, Canon 455. So to send a print job to it, it's very simple. you can use it directly from the command prompt here. You can use the LPR command to send a print job to a printer. LPR means print basically. And then you put hyphen uppercase P to specify the printer, Canon 455. And you specify the file that you want to print. So I want to print the etc hostname file. So there is no error message, so I have every reason to believe that it was successful. And now how do we check it? So if there was a print device, a hardware device, now paper would come out with the contents of this etc hostname file. But since we don't have the hardware device, we'll check it by looking at the spool directory. And that's where I am right now. I'm still in var spool cups. So if I do ls -l, you see, two files just appeared here. So this is the data file. This is the file that contains the actual contents of the file host name that's to be printed. And the file that follows it a few seconds later is a control file, is a timing of the printing there, okay? So every time you set a print job, you get a data file, and shortly afterwards, the control file goes into the spool directory. So that's the proof that it's working. Any questions there? Yeah, it doesn't go in temp. It goes directly into var spool caps. So now I'll do a second example where instead of using the LPR command in the shell, I'll use an application to send a print job. So since we're in the GUI, that's easy to do. I will open a text editor in the applications here. If I go to accessories, there is, for example, here gedit. Genome editor. And I'll simply print this file. So there's a printer option here. No, it's open, sorry, printer is here. And here we go, Canon 455. Now, why is it that I see other printers here, Citizen 2, Laser 2? It's because I have also other virtual machines and I am plugged to the switcher, I'm on a network. And these two other printers are shared on other machines. Now don't worry about it. Right now we're not doing network printing, we'll do that in the next module. So for now, this is my local printer, Canon 455. So print. And if I go back to my spool folder there, var spool caps, I'll do ls-l again. So here we go. So I just got now a new data file at 929, and the control file will follow in a few seconds. See, if I do ls-l again, it will be there soon. Here we go. Now I got the control file as well, right here. Now, when you look at the size of the files, it's interesting, right? Because the one I just sent through gedit is much bigger than the one I did through LPR earlier. LPR was this one here, the data. It was only 18 bytes. Why? Because when you use an application like gedit, it has more overhead. Even though I typed only a single word hello there, the file size is large. That's because of the application's overhead. But the control file size doesn't increase that much. It went from 776 to 1063, although the file content went from 18 to 10,983. But anyway, that's just some interesting explanation. But the important thing is that you see all the files appearing in the spool directory, as you said, print jobs. Any questions here? If the print device was there, then these documents will be sent to the print device and will be removed from the spool directory. Since we don't have the print device, they will stay for a long time in the spool directory. Of course, as root, you may delete these files if it bothers you after a while. All right, so it's pretty straightforward, right? Installing and using a printer. So to install it, you use the, let me quickly recap there, or I have it in lecture notes. So to install it, you use the systemconfig printer command. And using the shell, you can use the LPR command to print a document. Here I have an example. Notice that the printer name should be properly entered. When I start a printer, it's capital C Canon. So it's case sensitive, right? So you have to type everything right. Don't forget, Linux is case sensitive. So here's an example of LPR. And my second example was using an application like gedit to send a file to the printer. And in any case, you check it by checking the contents of the var spool caps directory. That's where I am right now, and that's where I got the files. So it's always a pair of files, the data file and the control file corresponding to a document. Just to help understand better, what if I stop now the cap service? So I'll do system control, stop caps. And now I'll try again to print the document. If I go, if I check again now ls minus L, all right. Yeah, what happened here, I know it's a bit misleading. It still went through here because it used another service, which is our default service. Because there's also the LPD service in Linux, which can work with the LPR command. That's why, even though I stop caps, it still sent here the job to the spooler. But in general, we'll be using caps as our printer service. So I'll start the service again. All right. So we're not done with printers yet. There's another interesting feature I'm about to demonstrate. And it's in the lecture notes. That's the IPP protocol, which is to manage printers using a web browser. So let me explain this. So again, I use the system config printer command to install my printer, right? So this works no problem, it's very easy. You follow the wizard, you install it, and you use it. However, one thing is that this depends on the GUI, right? This is a GUI tool. If I were the black screen, this would not work. I would not be able to open this wizard. And in this version of CentOS, we don't have an equivalent command at the black screen. There used to be one in the past, which was a command to run a wizard like this, but without the mouse at the black screen. But it's no longer in CentOS 7. So what does it mean? Does it mean that when you don't have the GUI, you can install a printer? That would be a bit of weakness in the design, right? Because, as I said many times, administrators like to have a server without GUI. So how would you deal with installing a printer when you don't have GUI? There is more than one answer to it, but what I'll show now is something very nice and very user-friendly. So the idea would be, maybe I might have a diagram here, let me see. Sorry. Here we go. So look at this diagram. So here's my CentOS server, and we may assume that this has no GUI. I may run this server only with a black screen. GUI not needed. Okay? So then I will need another machine having GUI, but that's not a problem. The idea is to have a secure server here and a fast server without GUI. But in your network, you probably have other machines, like could be Windows 10 station or another CentOS machine that does have GUI, because an our machine is not critical. It doesn't need to be that fast and that secure. So from the other machine, regardless of which operating system it is running, you'll be able to open a web browser, and through the web browser connect to the server which is without GUI, and use a tool to add and configure printers on that server. Okay? So the printer will be attached to this server. I'll show it here. So here is the printer. All right? So from the R machine, you simply use this feature of opening the web browser, connecting to the server which has no GUI or doesn't use the GUI, and with the appropriate tool that you'll see in a moment, you'll be able to add and configure the printer which is attached to the server. Okay, so it's an example of remote management, but specifically for printer purposes. And the protocol used for this is called IPP. IPP stands for Internet Printing Protocol. So it's using a web browser, whether you're on internet or not, doesn't really matter. So it's Internet Printing Protocol. And the port number of this protocol is 631. You may have seen this in Windows courses previously. It's the same IPv protocol, port 631. So before I demonstrate this, any questions on the idea? All right, so now what I'll do here, I'll show it on the server itself to start with, okay? So I am on a server right now where I've added my printer previously. So I'll open a web browser. What's available here is Firefox by default. And we've seen this before, right? Last week when we saw applications. So, but we don't need to be on the external switch. We're not going online. So Firefox. And now, look at what I will type in the URL field. I'll type the loopback address. 127, sorry. (001). This loopback, right? Meaning on any machine, this refers to the machine itself. Regardless of the IP assigned to the machine, this is the loopback. It is the localhost, the machine itself. And for a port number, because web browsers by default assume port 80. For the HTTP protocol. But now I want the port for IPP. So I'll put a colon and a port number 631. So this means on this local machine, connect to port 631 using this web browser, meaning use the IPv protocol. So you see it opens this page which is about CUPS configuration for printers. So now, if I click on printers here we go. I see the Canon 455 I installed earlier. If I want to install a new printer, I'll go to administration and add printer. Now, at this point, it'll ask you to authenticate because by default, only root can do it. Adding a printer is an administrative task. So here we go. This will have a wizard similar to what I did earlier with system config printer. You can use again, forget about network options for now. You can use the serial port again to install your printer. So it's really a similar wizard. But running it through the web browser now. Okay, I will cancel it, I will not continue now, but you see the idea. All right, so that's the way to connect with web browser 127.0.0.1 port 631, and you authenticate as root to be able to do operations like adding or configuring a printer. Any questions so far? So now I'll close the browser and let's go back to the diagram. I use 127.0.0.1 on the server itself, but the more useful aspect, as I explained earlier, will be the ability to do this from another machine, because again, the server may not have GUI at all. Okay, so I want to be able to go on another machine and do this connection to the server through a web browser. But that will require typing the actual IP of the server. So here I have 250, but let me make it consistent. So I have now is 60 as an IP on my server. So it means instead of putting loopback address, I should put the IP. But now let's try that. So I open my browser again. And this time, I'll put again 127.0.0.1, but I'll put the IP of the machine. All right, numlock is always backwards here, sorry for this. So 160, so this is the IP of the server, of the machine. And I'll put 631 for the IPv port. And I see unable to connect. So what happens for security reasons, by default, it does not let you connect by the IP. It only connects with the loopback 127.0.0.1. It means by default, it lets you do it only locally here. For security reasons, it doesn't let you do it from another machine by typing the IP. Now that's the real thing I want to get, to be able to do it remotely. And of course there is a solution for it, but for this to work by the IP, you will need to do additional configuration that I don't intend to show now. I'll give you a hint of how to do it, but you see that by default, it does not let you type the IP. It works only with the loopback address. With the loopback, it works again, no problem. So how to get it to work with the IP? I'll give you the hint. So you see, in my diagram, I already sort of part of the answer there. There's a directory in etc, which is etc cups, and under it you have the cups configuration file, etc cups cupsd.conf. So let's have a look at that file. So I'll go to etc cups. Remember, etc contains system configuration as an example of it. So etc cups is a directory where you have cups related configuration files, and in particular there is cupsd.conf. So when I open this, you see here, there are lines like listen localhost 631. Here is where the configuration is done, and this is the default configuration. I haven't changed anything in this file so far. So if you want this server to support connecting up port 631 using the IP of the server, you'll have to do a bit of editing in this file. And I'm not giving the answer at this point. We're not doing networking yet, but if you're interested and you have free time, you may want to look into this, right? You may want to go online and see what to change in this file, what to edit in order for that web browser connection to work using the IP of the server and not only the loopback address. The answer is in this file. But I recommend that before you edit this file, save a backup of the original, so that if you do something wrong and you mess up with it, you can easily restore the original. Any questions on this one? On the IPP feature in general? So the location of this file again is etc caps. But right now in this module, I will not expect you to be able to connect by IP. I just want to mention this file so that if you have time, if you're motivated, you may look for a solution. But I expect you to know how to do it with the loopback as I demonstrated. Okay, that works by default. So instead of running system config printer, you may on your server, on your machine, open the web browser, Firefox, and put the loopback address 127.0.0.1 with port 631. This works without any additional configuration. And you can install a new printer by going to administration, add printer. You can change the configuration, everything, right? So any question on this part, IPP? All right. So we're done with printers at this point. This was only local printers, but in the next module we'll see sharing printers for network operation. So we're getting close to break time. After the break, I'll do another very important subject, which is disk and volume management. So before that, this is a good time to ask any questions you might have before we take a break. So let me ask you guys, while I'm lecturing right now, what are you doing? Are you working on lab report? Or are you following lecture, taking notes? This is not the time to work on a lab report. That's in the afternoon, after the lecture there. Okay? You know, I just don't want you to get hurt, because yes, if you don't take notes in this lecture, if you don't practice this stuff later today and tomorrow, yes, in the short term for the Monday lab report, you'll be okay. But what are you going to do in the lab test next Sunday? What are you going to do in the next module when we will need these things and more? So we're going to build on it. This is where, unfortunately, some students are short-sighted. They just worry about what's on next day or 2 days later, and then they don't see the big picture. This is time to follow this lecture, take notes, and then put everything I'm teaching into practice in the lab time. Okay, yeah, CAPS daemon, the term daemon in Linux simply means service. You'll see this often, and it's also why, you see, why is it that the CAPS file here ends with D, capsd.conf, CAPS daemon. It simply means the service, daemon, okay? You see this often for other services too. All right, so to recap quickly before the break, then what I did this morning so far, let me open. So we started by doing the sudo feature, very important, user rights. And I gave the lab report question 2 based on that. Then we spent a few minutes on system management, so service management with the system control command. And then we did printers, including IPP. So the second part of the lecture after the break will be on another very important subject, which is disk and volume management. To install another printer, I don't mind doing that. All right, we'll do that after the break then. Or, very quickly I can do it now because it takes, we have 2 or 3 minutes, it should be enough. So to do a second example of printer installation, you may do it with IPP or you may do it with system config printer command. So if I repeat what I did earlier with the system config printer command, so add. So this time I'll use serial port 2. I will put 2 printers on the same port. Forward. You wait a few seconds here for it to give up searching for drivers. So this time I'll add maybe a Citizen printer. Not too many modes there, so let's say project 2. I'll simply call it Citizen -2 as a user-friendly name, and that's it. Print the test page, and it's available now. So now to send a print job to this one, I can use the LPR command, and with -p I'll put the name of this one, so Citizen. I just forgot how to spell Citizen now. Let's all right. Sorry. All right, I messed up here. So let's do it again. So LPR -p, Citizen with the uppercase C, 2, and I want to print etc hosts. So there it is. It goes to the same spool directory, var spool caps. So I got now the data number 4 file at 10 o'clock sharp. And shortly afterwards, there will be a control file as well. There we go, the control file just appeared now. All right, so it's 10 o'clock, we'll take our break. As usual, I'll be back at 10:15.